Welcome to the One-on-One Podcast with your host, Juan Ayala.
Welcome back to another episode of the One-on-One Podcast. I'm your host, as always. Make sure to check out the show on social media at the One-on-One Podcast on most social media platforms. One-on-One on YouTube, Twitter, or X, whatever, all that stuff. Join the Discord, join the Telegram, call into the show. I haven't done a call-in show in a minute. I haven't really been plugging it all that much, but I think it's 407-476-4606. Let me double check that. Make sure that's right. I don't even know if I remember it correctly. 476. Yeah. 407-476-4606. Call in, let us know what you think about this episode. Call me to tell me I'm gay or a shill or something, whatever, who cares. But joining us today is the one, the only shill master himself, the paranoid American, the gayest of the gays. What's up, dude?
I made you say that. You probably don't even realize that, but I implanted shill master into your head.
Did you?
I did. Yeah, I was saying it quietly before we started, and you said it, so it worked.
Oh, I fell for your trap, dude. You hidden Yu-Gi-Oh trap card. So before we get into it, dude, where can people find your work? Your podcast, your YouTube channel, anything you want to plug?
Just go to paranoidamerican.com. We got comics and toys and stickers and all that stuff. And I got a podcast. So I guess if you're listening to podcasts, just search for Paranoid American and it'll come up.
Right on. And for those listening right now on the RSS feed, or I'm probably going to do like a little intro on YouTube for this, but this will more than likely 99.8% chance will not make it on YouTube because of what we're going to be talking about today. And we're going to be talking about, so I might have to even censor that for the intro for the YouTube. So if you're listening to this, make sure to check out the link if you want to watch the video, because Thomas is going to be doing a presentation, and he's also going to be live for us today.
No, that's for my on your show.
Well, you cut out there, dude.
As I'm doing that on my Patreon. I'm not doing that for your show.
Well, okay, you shill. All right. Anyways, if you want to watch this video, it's probably not going to be on YouTube. It's going to be on Rumble. So go check it out on there. And yeah, and welcome. So where do you want to begin, Thomas? Because this is a topic that I remember I called you. I don't know what I had called you for. And I was asking, I was like, so what is in the actual, because right now people go, oh, you can go on Google and adrenochrome and you can buy some of it on there, right? Like that's the whole thing. But then
why didn't I think of that? Jeez, I've been all this time. I had no idea you could just go online and search for a word and click on random links.
Well, that's what we're going to talk about today. What is the stuff online that they're selling? What is the real stuff? Where did this begin? Is it fake? Is it gay? Is it fake and gay? Where do we start, dude?
I guess I'll start with, if anyone can get a hold of real, pure, reach out to me. I will do it live on a live stream. Got no qualms about it. But don't send that fake AliExpress, Alibaba, powdered red salt stuff. And yeah, but it's I believe it's a variation called ℏ-carbazochrome, which means they mix it with a salt to make it shelf stable. But when you do that, it loses all of its sort of like psychedelic properties. So it's just a waste of time and money and effort for everybody.
So let's see here. We go here. Let's go shopping. You can get Adrenotone for $32.29.
No, well, so it does matter. So the letters have to line up. It has to be adrenochrome and not some other branded derivative of it. And if you just search for, AliExpress or something, probably find some of the advertisements for it. They have them in laboratories here in the States too. I've followed these things all the way to their logical ends. Every single link anyone's ever sent me. Here, the main issue you run into is that they're going to ask you for lab credentials. So I have gotten confirmed from a DEA agent that adrenochrome is not a federally scheduled substance. So it's not a felony. The DEA will not come after you for having. But the fact that you have to have lab credentials in order to get it, that makes it a little bit dicey for the people that have that access, because usually to get lab access, you have to sign some version of a Hippocratic oath that says, do no harm. And I think that if someone were to go to your boss, if you've got one of these lab passes, and said, hey, your employee just used their credentials to buy for some weirdo theorist on a live stream, that might put their job in jeopardy, but it is not a legal jeopardy. So let me just make that very clear. If you can get access to real, I'm here for it. I will do it.
So the fact that you need credit, and do they say why? Because it's is it a controlled substance of sort? Is it on some sort of, am I going to be on a list now for Googling this stuff or what?
I mean, those two things don't have to be related to be true. Yes, but I think that you don't necessarily need lab credentials. It's just the only place you can get most of it in a pure form that would actually be psychedelic in some capacity. The only places that really you can get it from would be labs. So they just have a blanket policy. They don't just interact with normal consumers. They interact with labs. So they would send it to you if you've got those kind of credentials. It sorts out the riffraff, I think. But I've got confirmation. And that also doesn't state to the laws of every single state. It's very possible that there are other states out there that explicitly list as being some kind of a banned substance. But again, it's outside the purview of the DEA. And as far as I'm aware, it's nowhere on Florida legislation. So it gets complicated. And the reason that I looked this far into it is because someone did reach out to me on Twitter. I had a post that went viral, got like 15 million views. And there was, the self-proclaimed scientist, big NASA shill. And he said, well, hey, put up or shut up. I can get you. So then I was like, oh man, what happened?
Wait, what'd you ask for in that post? Were you, because I think I did see it, but were you asking people for it?
No, definitely not. Someone was just trying to make that point, like any idiot can just order it online. Why don't you just do it? So then I had to put all my toys down and explain it very slowly to this, scientist too. No, that's 𝔾𝕆𝕆𝕆𝔾𝕃. And even if you do send me the link, I've called those companies, I've wrote them the emails, I've jumped through all the hoops, and then it always ends up with that lab credential. He's like, well, I've got lab credentials. So at that point, I was just thinking logically, if, a cop shows up and we're in the parking lot of a Walmart and he's handing over to me and I'm giving him money, does anyone go to jail? And if so, for how long? And what laws have we broken? And can I own firearms anymore? These were real questions that were going through my head. So I tracked all of that down, and it's legal. It's legal to possess. It's legal to use. It's just not a very known drug. And I'm sure if say I popularized it by doing a live stream when I was like, whoa, this works, and now everyone's trying to get it, maybe that could spur legislation, because it turns out most of the time they don't like people having fun with.
All right. So for those that haven't heard of adrenochrome, let's talk about what it actually is from a. So here we have the apart from the conspiracies, then we can get into the stuff. But can you break it down for us exactly what it is from a standpoint? Not the hey, they peel the faces off of and then wear it and then drink the blood.
That's frazzle drip. That's different. That's a extraction process allegedly. So it's as simple as this. If you had a pen full of epinephrine, you had one of those epipens that people get for anaphylactic shock or bee stings or overdoses or whatever, This is something that it's a clear liquid, and it's been used forever. It's been used for over 100 years at this point. Now, if you let it sit for a really long time, it'll degrade, it'll oxidize, and that adrenaline will start to decompose and turn into, and you can tell if that's happened because your EpiPen will now have a pink hue to it. So in fact, that was one of the very first names for it. As people were figuring out what it was also known as pink adrenaline because of this effect with the EpiPens expiring and starting to turn pink. So, I mean, in its most basic form, it's simply adrenaline that has decomposed, usually in the body or out of the body, and slightly turns into this pink and then a red and then maybe a brown and then like a dark black hue, all depending on how long it's been exposed at room temperature to oxygen.
Okay, and I'm seeing here what you were talking about so it turns here that reddish pinkish hue. So
right, and that's what that little window is for on EpiPens. It's to let you check the color, because if it goes anywhere other than clear, you're supposed to just throw it out. Now, the reports that were coming in was, I think, post World War II, soldiers were reporting hallucinations in mass, at least in such a consistent way that eventually just regular pattern recognition, they realized, oh, when these EpiPens start to go bad, these soldiers report seeing and hearing things. It was fairly mild. It went away pretty quickly, and they still got some of the adrenaline they needed in the EpiPen. So it was really like, leave those ones for later. But if you're at war and you don't know when the next batch of EpiPens are coming in, you're taking those pink adrenaline shots because you still need the leftover epinephrine that's still in them. So this is where a lot of it sort of started, and it dovetails into MK Ultra research. But let me stop there before we get too crazy.
Whoa, okay. So an EpiPen is adrenaline. So it's, you take it, and then there's people taking it during wars to get what? To get hyped up on the stuff? To keep...
No. Typically, it's going to be for some sort of an allergic reaction. What people would typically need an EpiPen for. There's also sort of like agents that you might run into in warfare, and this is ways. But yeah, just by doing a straight injection of epinephrine, you're no longer relying on your body's endocrine system to generate a massive amount of adrenaline. It's just immediately in your system, ready to go right off the bat. So, I mean, the possibilities are somewhat endless for what you'd use it for. I don't think it's a known or advocated purpose to, like, let's just get jacked, let's go, let's rush into the battlefield, and come on, guys, everyone hit your EpiPens. It's usually more of a preventative or like a reactionary use of, you got stung by a bunch of bees or ants or something. Again, like an anaphylactic shock kind of deal, I believe.
And where do they get the adrenaline from, these EpiPens? Do they create it, or do they harvest it from people?
So, from what I understand,
because I'm gonna be clear, I know nothing other than the baseline, and this is why I find it so interesting, because I know nothing other than the baseline stuff of, hey, they don't deal with regular people, they only deal with the elites and other accredited labs that are using this stuff, and that's why you're only able to get it between a select few people, right? So that's the only thing that I know of. The frazzle drip, which you said is an extraction process, and the whole video of Hillary Clinton with, what's her name, Uma something or other?
Huma Abedin.
Huma Abedin. Wasn't she married to Wiener?
Yeah, she was.
That connection there is weird to me.
And that's where the frazzle drip comes from, because allegedly it was a folder on his hard drive inside of another folder called life insurance, and there was a file called frazzled.rip on it, or you could read it across as frazzle drip. That's the rumor. The rumor was that it was found on one of Wiener's laptops, and it had a picture of Huma and Hillary taking some girl's face off, and I guess allegedly using that process to extract the drip. It was like a really dark footage. Apparently it's lost forever now, even though it's a freaking video and nothing ever really gets lost. But it's just like a Slender Man level theory folklore at this point. But that's where it comes from, and yeah, it's like all related to Anthony Weiner.
Yeah, like a creepy pasta lost footage type of thing. And I love the people who go around online talking about that they've seen it. Like,
Right.
oh, I remember seeing this back and blah, blah, blah. It's like, oh, so you're admitting to what? Because wasn't it like a kid that they were doing that to? It wasn't like
Yeah, but I didn't see it, and I've only heard the stories of people that have seen it, and I don't believe it was anything overtly sexual. I think it was just straight up ripping some kid's face off, which, I mean, if you want to classify this pornography, that's about you than anybody
at
else.
least child abuse, right?
Right. Yeah, I guess so.
I mean,
yeah.
if I was, if somebody was to rip their kid's face off, I would at least want them put in jail for the rest of their lives for child abuse and maybe perhaps murder. But and then the whole connection with Wiener and that allegedly the New York, I think the head guy there, didn't he kill himself? And also, weren't they talking about how heinous it was what they found on that laptop that it made him like physically throw up?
Yeah, I mean, we're getting into like Tim Ballard QAnon level of claims here as to the specifics of why someone would exit stage left early and what they might have seen on this video. Now we're almost talking about The Ring, right? Like it's a video, and 7 days later, you will die, almost like a Final Destination. Like, what? Can you just show this video to someone and they turn dead? Maybe, but before we get too much on a tangent on the weird frazzle drip video and what may or may not have been on it, it's a common claim that comes up in this realm that you somehow have to torture someone, specifically like a young kid.
We can end this here.
Prepubescent kid.
This is factcheck.org. No evidence.
Okay.
All right, let's just leave.
You got to see what Snopes says. I can't rest it until I see what Snopes says.
Yeah, we can just shut this episode down right now. Thank you guys for tuning in.
See you guys next time. Yeah, this is over.
Factcheck.org. No evidence of horrific Clinton video. This was 2018. So,
and right. I you know me well enough that I'm probably more of a shill skeptic than most people from the hip, which is why I think my research on adrenochrome is more important than many other people's. I'll just say it out loud because I do come from an absolute skeptic standpoint. So let me.
And you care about the truth with a capital T.
Correct. Yeah, the one that you have to pay money for on Patreon, but that's the one that I care about.
Yeah, and if you're listening to this, then anyone listening right now cares about the truth, the real truth. We got the real
capital
truth.
T. Yeah,
with a capital T, not with a lowercase.
Mine actually has 2 capital T's in it. The first one and the one at the end, just so it's double. It's double capital T truth.
There you go. So I pulled up your screen.
So let me finish on the note on this frazzle drip thing. The claim is that you got to torture a young kid and that somehow their body produces either more, which doesn't make sense, or it's more potent, which also doesn't make sense. So let me just nod those 2 claims. To produce more, the size of a child's adrenaline glands that are on the top of your kidneys. Interestingly enough, one is a shape of a pyramid, the other one's a crescent moon.
Really?
Yeah, that's actually true.
That's the shape of what? Let me look that up. Shape of?
You have 2 adrenal glands. One is on top of each kidney. On one of your kidneys, your adrenal gland has a pyramid shape.
Whoa.
And on the other kidney, the adrenal gland looks like a crescent moon. This has been known since the Middle Ages, since they started picking people apart and looking for this stuff.
And I just learned it now. So
that is fascinating in my mind. You've got a pyramid and a crescent moon that regulates part of your endocrine system for generating adrenaline, and therefore. But here's one of the problems with that claim about harvesting it from kids is that it is incredibly inefficient. So here's an analogy that I like to bring up is that you can go to a fancy restaurant where you spend $2,000 and they just give you these little amuse-bouche entries, right? They fit the entire meal on one spoon bite, and you eat that bite and you get like 6 of them and you spend like $1,000 or $2,000. That's not efficient. You're not going to keep yourself and your family fed on that. If the kids are clamoring because they just got home from soccer practice, you're not going to be like, all right, everyone load up. We're going to spend $1,000 each on a amuse-bouche. But that doesn't mean that people don't sit down and go to these boutique restaurants and have these world-class Michelin chefs prepare them weird esoteric meals that, afterwards they still need to go and get like a pizza or something because they're not full from it. But they still do that. So Yeah, it's absolutely possible. There's someone out there harvesting adrenaline specifically from kids, the same way that you would go to a high-end restaurant or something like an invite-only reservation. But at a massive scale, there's really no reason that you would want to do that, and you don't need them to be alive. There's no real claim of potency, mainly because is a isolated. So it's not like weed or like tobacco or alcohol where there's like a proof, right? If you can get pure alcohol, just straight, like you get ethanol alcohol, right? That's a very specific kind of a substance, and you can get like 99% pure or 89% pure, depending on what you need it for.
Moonshine, which is like proof.
Exactly. But if you're talking about it in terms, it's just a substance, no different than ethanol alcohol, where someone's not going to be like, how potent is your ethanol alcohol? Well, if we both are operating with 90% alcohol, then it's the exact same sort of substance. There's no difference in potency between that. So that I don't think there's any real claim to fear or childhood or anything would have to do with the potency. And then finally, where do they actually get it from? We already have a widespread sort of like livestock factory supply chain that's already established, and cows have much larger adrenal glands than people. In fact, compared to the ratio of all other animals, cows still have some of the biggest ones. So in the early 1900s to 1930s, pretty much all of the adrenaline and was pretty much coming from animals that were already being experimented on. So this would have been cows, pigs, rabbits. Technically, anything with an adrenal gland you can get adrenaline from, and therefore fish, lizards, babies with their faces torn off. Like, these are all potential sources, but they're very inefficient sources.
So this would make sense as to why the whole cow abduction phenomenon is, right, where they go and they mutilate these cows, but usually they don't. Some are missing organs, right? Like they cut them up.
I mean, I guess, but you wouldn't need to abduct a cow because cows are already part of this massive sort of like meat packing processing industry that we've got in this country. And I don't think that there's a lot of chefs out there that are like, give me your finest adrenal glands. They go perfect with this meal. It's basically something that would have no other known use except for industry research. So, and I'm talking 1900s, 1930s. Now, today in 2025, you can technically derive adrenaline and by proxy through, meaning you can take petroleum, you can take crude oil, and through a series of different steps, you could, in theory, and provably, there's research that already shows that they've created epinephrine from. So at that point, you can even have yourself some vegan.
Whoa, dude. That's pretty well. So you would say, aside from a cow, what is the most efficient animal or thing to use for adrenochrome? How about a whale? Has anyone ever done a whale? That's a huge animal.
It's possible. I just, again, like the amount of effort it would take to go and hunt down a whale and then extract the whale's adrenal glands and then process them, you'd probably still have way more luck with just our existing factory farming output, right?
Adrenal. So here I'm looking for an adrenal gland of a humpback whale. That'd be crazy. You think this is what Crowley was pointing at with this? It looks like his little hat that he wears.
You know, it's not actually a hat. This is also a fun fact that's a robe. It's just the way that he's wearing the top of his robe, and it has the emblem on it. Everyone thinks that it's this pyramid hat. It's not. It's a freaking thelema robe.
You'd know because you have one, right?
I mean, I've got some custom made, yes.
Nice. Okay. So is this perhaps why the petroleum industry is so big? Because we have guys, right, like John D. Rockefeller, who were at the forefront of pushing this industry that at one point was, or is still, I mean, we use petroleum in pretty much all products till this day.
Well, the claim here isn't that petroleum was just a way to get to making I think it's more of a case in point that a does not need to be harvested from kids, let alone animals, and that almost anything we can essentially synthesize from.
No, I get what you're saying that, but some people like it the good old fashioned way, dude. You know what I'm saying? Like they want.
Right. Well,
I don't want to read my books
like,
on a tablet. I want to read my books physically.
Right. You want to pop a straw right into a baby's head and suck the right out like a Capri Sun.
I'm sure that unfortunately there are some people who are probably into. So do you believe in this whole? Because this is a huge, bro. This is like one of the main ones that people really get into. That the elites are running these pedophilia, child molestation rings, whatever you want to call it, and that part of the reason that they do that is to extract stuff. Like this is one of the holy grails of conspiracies. And I want to just peel apart the layers as to why some people believe it. And there is some, I'm not saying that do you believe that they're doing it?
I think that it's very reasonable to think they are doing something like that, but I think it's unreasonable to think that the end product of that is because they're looking for like all of those can be true, but I don't think it would be the same thing as like, do you think that going out and spending $1,000 on 6 spoonfuls of some master, is that because you were hungry?
Money's not an option, not an issue.
Right, but it has nothing to do with your hunger. It has everything to do with you want to go through this exclusive experience that feels like you got to live through something that no one else ever has, or that only a small number of people, or that somehow it's going to activate some taste buds that no other meal has ever activated for you. It's all about expanding your sort of life experience. So if the question is reframed as, do you think rich people and people that have, enormous amounts of political and financial capital, do you think that they do extreme things with their money to test the limits of like their own life experience and sort of like mentality? Yeah, of course people do that. So it's no crazier than if someone was like, take a sip out of this straw in a baby's head or jump out of this airplane, there's probably some people that would be like, I'll go with the straw. Like if all things being equal, I'll take a little sip instead of jumping out of a plane. Yet people do both of those.
You think this guy's taking a?
I think that guy probably knows about some of the research that went into this, specifically something called the hypothesis, because Albert Hoffman, Hoffner actually has a theory.
Who's that?
That the closer he's the guy that Hoffner and Smithies are two of the names that put it 2 and 2 together as to pink adrenaline was this stuff, and they started testing specifically for the first time. We're going to get into that on this. That the guy you're showing, he's probably aware of some of that work, because that work talks about how family lines might have survived the bubonic plague and might have survived all sorts of other nationwide pandemics, and that might be related to in a very indirect way.
Sounds kind of racist and anti-Semitic in some sort of way.
Yeah, well, as all good theories should be.
Yeah, so whatever, who cares? This guy's a weirdo. He looks fake. He looks like an AI generated character, and I think he called his son like he called him something weird because he takes his son's plasma, I think it was.
Yeah, it's when you call them blood boys.
Blood, yeah. Oh man, that's so bizarre, dude.
There was a episode of that show Silicon Valley by Mike Judge, the guy behind Beavis and Butthead, and this is almost a decade old now. But there was a feature, like one of the seasons, kind of focused on this guy Gavin Belson, who I believe was supposed to kind of be like a Bill Gates character that had a blood boy that would follow him around. He went and found like a 17-year-old quarterback at a high school, like some kid that was, getting all the records, and would just pay him money to come over and just do blood transfusions while they were working and stuff. So this is not a new concept. This has been around forever. And you can wind it up back to like Elizabeth Bathory, which I think I do in this presentation that I got.
The lady that bathed in the blood of
young girls and maids and everything else. So there's an interesting, I guess the crux of this too is that I think the most rational way to look at it It's almost like a scientific substitute for blood libel or for vampirism or for cannibalism. All of the supernatural elements that are associated usually with drinking blood or bathing in blood or eating people. If you were to remove all of the supernatural and like the religious connotations to that, you kind of have this that can still represent all of those things, but without having to believe in ancient Sumerian magic or anything supernatural at all, actually.
Which, of course, blood libel is, right? Speaking of anti-Semitic, this is very anti-Semitic, so be careful what you say on this episode, Thomas.
Well, I thought we were already just on Rumble, so
yeah. Oh, you're right. Yeah. So it's always
we
it's always
can't
them.
not talk about blood libel because that's going to be the crux of part of this presentation. So strap in, buckle up.
All right, let's do it. Strap in, strap on.
This one is called What is Adrenochrome? It was originally put together for Bohemian Grove, although time constraints and technical constraints, it was limited to like a 40-minute version. So I'll be able to go in a little bit more detail on this one.
Do it.
So, okay. So here, let me get rid of all the boring and the like scientific stuff first. So if anyone wants to look up anything that I'm talking about, I don't hide my sources. I don't shoot from the hip. I got the receipts for everything, even the things that I maybe say and quickly breeze over, hit in the comments or whatever. I have got sources for every single claim made into this. So 1923, there was a paper that was published, and they were talking about a deep color of adrenaline-based solutions left at room temperature for 24 hours. And this is important, that they concluded the more deeply colored solutions were less active. In other words, it breaks down at room temperature. This is one of the reasons why you can't just order it online and it shows up in the mail from China or Boston or wherever the hell you got it from. It's that salted version. I've got more on this, but it really needs to be aqueous. It needs to be, the second adrenaline goes from clear to slightly pink, you need to have that, store it at negative 20 degrees so that it no longer decomposes and it stays at that state. So I'll explain more of that when we get into it. But here's the very first research paper that I could find. They don't name it at this point. No one's calling it, but here's someone observing it actually being synthesized out of adrenaline in 1923. 1934, this is going to get fun. The Scottish Rite Supreme Council, Northern Jurisdiction, they get together, and this guy on the right here, he decides, the Melvin B. Johnson, he was the head, the 33rd degree Supreme Rite Commander.
Illuminati confirmed.
Exactly. He decides that the Scottish Rite has got all these war chests. They got all this money, and they want to invest it into something noble that would align with what Scottish Rite believes. And what they ended up targeting was this concept called dementia praecox, which, if you know what dementia means, this is when grandma or grandpa gets old and they forget your name, and maybe it's Alzheimer's, or maybe they're just like wandering around talking to ghosts. Maybe it turns into schizophrenia. All of those things combined